Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming Don McLeod. Don McLeod, of course, played the horny gorilla in the classic John Landis movie Trading Places, but he also played T.C. Quinn in The Howling. And he was also in The Man with Two Brains. He played the, I've always never been able to pronounce this word, the Greeble on Amazing Stories. Really cool classic episode. And I'm having him on the show today to talk about all that stuff. And he's also got he's also a statue designer. I think he has a gallery. I'm going to ask him if he does. And I can't wait. It's going to be a pretty interesting interview, I think. So yeah, here is my interview with Don McLeod.
Hello.
Hey Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tommy. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you today?
Good. I'm happening. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. So.
Yeah, what a strange time we're in, huh?
Yeah, it's fairly confined, but I've always been pretty much of an isolated loner, even though my occupation puts me in the public eye sometimes. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of in my comfort zone with a little bit of discomfort laid on top of it.
Yeah, I've been mostly a homebody the last couple of years, and I want to get out of it. And this was the year that I was going to do it.
Yeah, good timing.
Yeah. Oh my God. But I got all these podcast interviews coming up, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, that's exciting. I've listened to some of them, and you're really, really good and excellent people. And my 6 degrees of separation is with a lot of people you've mentioned and people you know. I realized, oh my gosh, I have quite a connection here if you dig deep enough. So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. This is such a great honor. Thank you for taking the time today.
Oh, that's great. I got nothing but time here, so we're good to go.
Okay. So, going back in time, did you gravitate toward acting early on in your childhood?
Yes, I did. I was an only child, and I was adopted and lived in a very small town called Elk, California, which is in Mendocino County.
Mm-hmm.
The population was 95 was the population of our town. I lived on a little 10-acre mini farm with my parents, and so I had plenty of time to let the imagination flourish. And because of my somewhat isolated area, I started acting out characters that were in my imagination, so I was always running around being a character. So it was sort of the beginning of writing and acting for me, and it never really went away. I'm still pretty much doing that now.
Yeah, did you start out doing school plays and community theater and all that?
Yeah, I was a four-sport athlete in high school, and then in my senior year, the drama teacher at high school said, Don, you ought to try out for a play. And I thought, yeah, that sounds good. I'll do that. And so I ended up playing the lead in Scrooge and another play, I forget which one it was. And that started me off on a whole other thing because I was kind of in the jock vein in sports, and I wanted to become a professional baseball player. It was my initial dream, but then I realized I'd probably pursue acting, and my teacher suggested that I go to the Pasadena Playhouse, which was a top theater school here in Los Angeles, in Pasadena. That's the name, and he recommended me. I auditioned, and that really started off my serious training in theater, and to all kinds of other things.
What sports did you play in high school?
Baseball, basketball, football, and track.
Oh, I did football, wrestling, and track.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a good combination of physicality and the only thing I missed being in a little tiny high school, we didn't have, the more elitist type sports like, tennis or golf or those kind of sports. But we had the basics. And
yeah,
it was interesting being like an athlete in high school because that was the only way to excel in my little town, and I did pretty well at that. And there wasn't, everybody thought when I went off to study theater in Los Angeles, they kind of said, "Oh, we've lost a good one. What's wrong with you, McLeod? You're giving up. You're supposed to marry the girl next door, get fat, drink beer, and work in the lumber mill." And I thought, no. There was a magazine I saw called Plays and Players, and it was a bunch of guys holding spears and women in bustiers. It was a Shakespearean production on the cover, and I thought, man, I want to be one of those people. I want to hang out. I want to hold a spear and meet those people. So that kind of got me interested in theater, and that's kind of the starting point for me. But it really went back to childhood, and because I was an only child, I told bedtime stories to my parents. And we lived in a small house, and their bedroom was in the living room. So every night they would get into bed, and I would go, "Okay, I have a bedtime story for you now." And they would go, "Okay, good." And it was kind of a role reversal, and my characters were based on bears and gorillas that were in my imagination, but they were also loosely based on colorful characters that I knew in the hometown or heard my parents talk about. So, and I know your history with Stitch and Sock Monkey and all those characters, you would relate to that with dolls and Gothic house, and that was very. I'm looking forward to reading Stitch. By the way, it sounds like you had a similar imagination first in your youth.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got bullied a lot. I just spent a lot of time at home watching movies and TV, and really prepared for my future. I didn't know that podcasting was ever going to exist, and I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it, and thank God the car accident I had a few years ago just, pointed me in the right direction.
So it was a happy accident despite, did you have some permanent injuries from it?
Oh yeah, I got permanent injuries, but you're right, it was a happy accident. Today was actually the 5-year anniversary of when I almost died of a blood clot during the recovery process. And
oh my gosh, well, congratulations that you made it to 5 years of free-flowing blood. So.
Thanks. It was Easter at the time, too. I was just, Easter has always been one of my favorite holidays, and I was just pretty devastated that I couldn't celebrate it the way I wanted to,
Are you in Los Angeles area now, or are you still up in Redding, your hometown?
I'm born and raised in San Francisco. I've lived up here for the past 3 years in Redding, but I'm trying to get to LA.
Okay, great. Yeah, San Francisco was, because I was in Mendocino County, which was about 125 miles north of the Bay Area. That was our few times a year major trip into the city, and that's where I got exposed to theater. And then of course I was in the late 60s in Haight-Ashbury and the renaissance of free thinkers and hippies and all kinds of stuff. So San Francisco is a very furtive place in my background too. Although I've been in LA now and via San Diego for most of my adult life. So
Yeah. Did you study mime?
I certainly did. I started in theater school. My third year, I think, or fourth year, I went to a place called the School of Performing Arts in San Diego. It was a 4-year theater university, and I had a wonderful teacher, Richmond Shepherd, and I took mime there and suddenly realized that it was everything I wanted to do. And then I had a scholarship to go study with Marcel Marceau, and it wasn't in Paris. It actually started out in San Francisco, where I met him, and he invited me to go on tour with him, and he said when I get time, meaning him, he would help me because he thought I had a lot of potential. I was just starting out, and so I studied formally with several people, and I know you've interviewed the director, actor, mime, Tommy McLaughlin, longtime friend of mine.
Yesterday, yeah.
That's funny because Tommy was in the LA Mime Theater along with other friends, and I was in Don McLeod's Mime and Music Machine, which was kind of David Bowie meets Genesis meets Marcel Marceau rock group. And because I was in LA and Tommy and the LA Mime Theater were doing stuff, and at the same time we were doing what Marcel Marceau said, Don does the rock and roll mime. And he said, this is very good. But it was not far from silent. It was very progressive rock music, and I was the lead movement artist. I didn't sing, I just dramatized all of the ideas, and I had a rock band that played with me, and some of them went on. One of my keyboard players went on to become the leader and the founder of Mr. Mister, and had a lot of #1 hits in the world. And so we did a lot of concerts. We opened for Fleetwood Mac and other big bands in big arenas, and that was one side of me. I was sort of out in front of most mimes were more or less silent, and I was far from silent. I was very theatrical, and did that for many years.
Do you know Barbie Wilde?
Pardon me, who?
Barbie Wilde.
No, I don't.
She's the female Cenobite in Hellraiser 2. She used to be a mime. She had a mime rock group in England.
Who did she play in Hellraiser 2?
The female Cenobite. You know, she's got like a bald head.
Oh, yes. I know who you're talking about. She probably knows Lindsay Kemp was a wonderful mime. I think he passed away just a year or two ago, but he encouraged David Bowie to, because David was a street mime initially before he went into singing or became David Bowie. I mean, he was always David Bowie, but he became famous. But his background was mime, and he probably knows her. Lindsay Kemp was his protege and teacher in London when he was starting to just transit into films.
Yeah, probably does know him.
After I've watched I haven't seen Hellraiser 2 for a long time, but I'll now go back and look at it for sure. So.
Oh God, Barbie is one of my favorite guests. She is so not PC, and she's so smart, and she loves all the same old movies and actors that I do and stuff. I get along great with her.
Great. Is she still in the UK?
Yeah. She's
okay. Yeah, I'll check her out. Maybe I'll if I drop your name, maybe I can connect with her on Facebook or some other social media. That would be nice.
Oh yeah, she's very personable and friendly. Your first movie was Tanya's Island?
That's correct. Well, technically my first movie was movie, I played a lot of different kind of Neanderthal people in that, and it didn't go anywhere. It was pretty awful. But the next one was Tanya's Island, is with my dear friend Rob Bottin, who I met on that picture, and have countless stories and memories of Tanya's Island. And Vanity, a.k.a. Dee Winters,
right,
a.k.a. Denise Williams.
Yeah.
Anyway.
She's a very beautiful and talented woman. Was she singing during that time?
No. She was discovered on the street by a producer named Pierre Brousseau, who said, "I want to make a movie, and I've got an idea, and you're my lead girl, and have you ever acted before?" And she said, "No, I've just been modeling." But so it was kind of an accident for her. So that was her first film, and I think she was, I believe, 20 when we did the film in Puerto Rico, and that was my kind of first major film that, well, I shouldn't say major, but it was, got a lot of exposure, more literally exposure, because Tanya was pretty much naked during the whole film, and Rob Bottin's wonderful beast costume that he designed. Originally, Rick Baker kind of came up with the idea, and then he was doing some other projects, so he passed the job on to Rob.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, because of my mime and movement training, and I was recommended to Rob, and that was the start of my suit work and character work, and eventually a lot of films. So.
Yeah, well, I didn't even realize that she had been a serious actress before she started singing. I do know she did, the Last Dragon and Too Young to Die with John Stamos, but I didn't realize, that she'd been a serious actress. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, she was just, she kind of didn't really, at that point, she did Tanya's Island, she hadn't really had much formal training. She was just a very striking young lady, so that kind of was her. She leaned on that more than, but her talent developed over the years, and, she had quite a tragic kind of end. She got very
sick. Yeah.
Yeah, she hit the party scene pretty hard, hanging out with Motley Crue and doing every kind of drug you could think of. And, in the end, she became a born-again minister. So,
oh, yeah.
I guess you knew that maybe, but I spoke with her just a couple of years before she passed away, and, she still had fond memories of her film career, and especially Tanya's Island, which was her first foray into doing special effects kind of films. But we got along great.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. My favorite werewolf movie of all time is The Howling.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit partial to The Howling because that was the first movie that I did that really got a lot of exposure. I mean, Tanya's Island kind of ran for a week in theaters and went straight to video, and The Howling was again, that was with Rob Bottin, and that was my first chance to work with some name actors. It was an exciting break for me, and ironically, they ended up filming a lot of The Howling in Mendocino, which is about 15 miles from where I grew up. So I was returning home as a werewolf, stalking Marcia and all the people around in the cabin up in the woods where I used to play, and it was an exciting time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're my fourth guest from the movie. I've talked to Dee Wallace, Belinda Belaski, and Terrence Winkless, who wrote one of the drafts of the script.
Sure.
Yeah. So was that just a standard audition?
It was an interesting audition because Rob, they were looking for a character to play. I played TC, who is
Right.
the brother of Bob Picardo's character, Eddie Quist. I was TC Quist, and there was Marcia, who was my quote-unquote sister.
Right.
But the audition, Joe Dante was looking for someone for the part, and Rob Bottin was on board already doing all of the werewolf and the change-out head and the transformation, all of the special effects. So Rob said, I got a guy that I worked with before. He's really good. He's a movement artist and actor, and he said, you should see him. So we went in, Rob and I went into Joe Dante and Mike's office in Hollywood, and Rob said, here he is, this is Don. And Joe went, Don, he looks like the boy next door. He doesn't look scary at all. Because I, at the time, was kind of boyish looking, and, I was not a leading man handsome, but I was kind of cute, I guess, for a 24-year-old guy in Hollywood. So John said, no, he's not scary. Rob goes, yeah, just wait. I'm gonna bring him back. So Rob took me back to his shop and did just a little makeup on me and put messed my hair up, and I think he put some teeth in, I can't remember, and he brought me back, and then I did a character thing. Before I was just talking to Joe Dante as a one-on-one actor, saying, oh yeah, I'd love to do this part, and kind of thing. So I came back and I transformed into PC, and I just, did some of the lines from the film, my sister will cook it up for you. Marcia just loves to cook. And Joe said, Jesus Christ, what'd you do, Rob? What'd you do to him? And Rob said, no, he's a good actor. I just put a little, put a little dirt on his face, basically, and stuck a pair of teeth in him. And so Joe said, yeah, he's got the part. That was that quick. And I kind of thought, wow, I like how Hollywood works. That got me my Screen Actors Guild card because I hadn't been in the union. And I said, Joe, I'm not in the union. Is that okay? He said, yeah, we'll get you in the top party law. So that meant you could do one union film, and then the next one you did after that, then you had to join. So that's how I became a Screen Actors Guild member, and Rob Bottin made it happen for me, and other special effects makeup artists were on the film. Greg Canham and Steve Johnson was one of Rob's assistants at the time, and so I really met some of the legends in special effects makeup, and much of my career I owe to those people: Rick Baker, Rob Bottin, Steve Johnson, Kevin Brennan. There's a whole long list of people that are not household names. I mean, certainly Rick Baker and Rob Bottin and Steve Johnson are household names to movie buffs or the horror sci-fi genre. But for me, that was opening to everything that I've ever done since. So,
yeah.
Forget the question.
Yeah, they made you look horrific with those fangs. How great was Dee to work with?
Oh, she was a sweetheart. She was just like I looked at her kind of like a loving, kind older sister, maybe. I mean, she wasn't that much older than me, but just a little bit. But she was really wonderful, and all of the people in the film were too. And I really enjoyed working with John Carradine.
Mm-hmm.
I remember sitting in the trailer with him before we had done a campfire scene, and John hadn't read the script yet, and which was which was pretty common for him. He would do these various low-budget films, and he'd just say, "What do you want me to do?" And, I didn't read the script. What's this about? And we were sitting in the trailer in costume, ready to go out to a scene around the fire, and he asked me, he had very bad arthritis at the time, and his hands were completely gnarled, and he said, "Son, could you light me up for cigarettes?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I lit the cigarette up for him, and he kind of wedged it into his claw. And he said, "What the hell is this film about? I haven't read it. What the hell's going on with this film?" And I said, "Well, you're an old werewolf, John, and you can't eat meat anymore because your teeth are bad. So you're going to try to kill yourself by throwing yourself into the fire." And he just looked at me and exhaled a puff of smoke, and he went, "Hell of a no." And he thought that was pretty funny, and he didn't say, "Oh, I should have read the script." He said, "Oh, okay." And so that was, I thought, here's the legendary John Carradine, and he's asking me what the fuck the film's about, and which was kind of just refreshing and humbling. And I thought, God, I only had I had about 10 lines in the movie as PC. It was mostly visual, and I thought I'd been studying these lines and saying them over and over again, and walking back and forth in my house trying to perfect them, and reading the script 3 times, and I was putting way too much emphasis into the deep psychological meaning of my character. And then I realized that John Carradine just asked me what the hell the film's about, and went out and shot the scene, and he was 10 times better than I was, I'm sure. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I've interviewed John Carradine's granddaughter, Callista, who was David's daughter, and she has fond memories of him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was great, and his stories were endless. And I know you know Ken Hall, my longtime friend.
Yes.
Because Ken had directed a couple films with John, and he'd had one film. Ken was telling me he had to make giant cue cards, written with a big Sharpie, and hold them up for his fairly extensive dialogue. I forget which film that was. You probably maybe know, but yeah, he.
I think you're talking about The Tomb.
Yeah, it might have been The Tomb.
Yeah. Ken wrote that, and Fred Olen Ray directed it.
Oh yeah, I did a Fred Olen Ray film called Tarzina. I did 2 films with Fred, and Tarzina was, because you're probably going to get to this, that I became somewhat infamous for playing gorillas.
Yeah.
And that was a gorilla movie that I did later in my gorilla career with Fred, and it was kind of a mixture of Tarzan and Xena, Queen of the Jungle. And
I don't remember that one. Huh.
Yeah, you can look it up. I think it's Tarzina. It's called. It was strippers and porn stars, and
of course, that's Fred.
Yeah, and a couple of really good actors.
Yeah.
Good friends of mine on it, and a lot of people that are still working a lot. And Fred was so great, He just said, "Oh, we don't have a lot of money, but we love the gorilla, and we got a part for you." And I did another one with him too. I can't remember what it was, but yeah, Fred was great, and that was the chance for me to nearly sweat myself to death in the San Bernardino Mountains and in a studio in North Hollywood, Tarzina.
Yeah. Do you have any memories of the movie Pandemonium?
Oh, man, you did your homework.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Pandemonium might be maybe my first film. I had totally forgotten about that one. Tommy Smothers and a bunch of people.
Paul Rubens, Judge Reinhold, a lot of people's in that movie.
Yes, Yes, exactly. Yeah, I played a crazy nurse, and I just had a couple of lines, funny lines in that film, and I can't even remember who directed. Was that Joe Dante directed that? No.
No. Let me look it up here.
Yeah, Pandemonium, probably 1979, 80.
Alfred Soule.
Oh, Alfred Soule. He directed Tanya's Island.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Alfred Soule directed it. I had forgotten about that film, and that's probably another link to how I got on Tanya's Island. And, of course, Mick Garrett is a longtime friend. We were in dueling rock bands together, and I actually did a guest performance with Mick's band Horse Feathers in San Diego. So we were good friends, and I worked with Mick, and then I did Amazing Stories, Spielberg TV series, which I hear rumors that it's coming back again to be released, I guess, have it in reruns. But anyway, Mick was responsible for getting me on one of the episodes of Amazing Stories.
Yep.
Called Speaking in the Bread Box. It was with Haley Mills, and I played a character called the Greeble. Remember that?
Yep, I remember the Greeble. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a Rob Bottin creature creation, and Mick Garrett wrote that script, and he was writing quite a few episodes with Steven Spielberg on that. And so that was a highlight for me too. It was really a fun job. And
how about The Man with Two Brains?
yeah, I was doing Men with Two Brains at the same time as I was doing Trading Places.
Mm-hmm.
So I was commuting back and forth from New York to try to, and at the same time I was the American Tourister luggage smashing gorilla that was in the infamous commercials. We did 10 of them over like a 15-year period, and I was kind of the corporate symbol for American Tourister luggage.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I had that suit, and between working for American Tourister, they did a lot of promotions all over the world, actually. So at the same time, I got one of the producers on Trading Places had seen my commercials, or I shouldn't say my commercials, the commercials I was in as a gorilla. And so he said, give me that guy. So I ended up getting the Trading Places job, and at the same time, the producer, Carl Reiner, said I have a great spot for a gorilla who gets the brain of Slurmy Beckerman, who was a nuclear physicist, and they put Slurmy Beckerman's brain into me, supposedly the gorilla, and blah blah blah. But yeah, so that was crazy because I was going back and forth and trying to keep the gorilla. I realized, and people laughed at me, said, "Don, why do you want to? I thought you wanted to be a serious actor. Why are you playing gorillas?" And I was literally laughing all the way to the bank. I actually remember one day I had 6 checks from the luggage commercials and from my work in Trading Places, and I walked to the bank, the Bank of America at the time in Sherman Oaks, where I still live in the same house. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take these checks and I'm going to laugh all the way to the bank. I literally walked 3 blocks to the bank laughing to myself that the people had told me, forget this acting stuff, Don. Just get a real job, marry a sweet fat girl from Pocatello and have a life. And I thought, this is my revenge. Not that I ever felt vengeful, but I just thought, I was always told you can't do it. My acting teacher said, "Mime, why do you want to be a mime? You never make any money." There's Marcel Marceau and Robert Shields, and that's about it. And I said, I'm going to find a way. And so whenever somebody told me you can't do it, to me that was the ultimate thing I wanted to do. So sometimes it wasn't the wisest choice, but but in terms of Man with Two Brains was great fun. Working with Carl Reiner and
yeah, I mean, that guy's
other people on that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's comedy royalty right there. That just must have been like the biggest coup in the world.
It was one of my favorite scenes was the character of Slurmy Beckerman was his characteristic signature was that apparently in his fictional real life with air quotes around it, he would scratch his balls and then snip his finger.
Oh, yeah.
Carl Reiner said, all right, Don, I want you to, he gave me the fictional background of the character. He said, now that his brain is in the gorilla, we want you to do that. So Steve Martin and David Warner are in the scene.
Right.
They're discussing me, and then I had to reach down and scratch my non-existent balls. Not, personally, I still had mine, but the suit was Sean's genitalia. So. Anyway, so I did that, but David Warner had like a full-page speech that he had to give to Steve Martin discussing the character and the situation, and he couldn't remember his lines. And he was such a sweetheart, because I know you're a walking encyclopedia of film knowledge, and I salute you for that. You probably remember Morgan, the film that David Warner was in, and
Morgan.
Do you remember that film?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, it was in the 60s, and he played a guy who couldn't cope with life, so whenever he couldn't cope, he had this bad Halloween costume, gorilla costume, and he would put it on and ride his bicycle around London. And so I had that in common with David Warner, and was in one of my favorite old films. It was never a very popular film called Morgan. Yeah, check it out. But anyway, he couldn't remember his lines. We had to do 42 takes of this one scene, and I was just dying in the suit. Just sweat was coming down, and they had to keep wiping the rubber chest on the suit because it looked like I was leaking oil or something. And David kept saying, he kept leaning in. He goes, Don, I'm really sorry. I know you're dying in there. He goes, it's okay. No problem, man. Okay. And I was ready to pass out from the heat, but that's a common flaw of working in state-of-the-art gorilla suits. In Tanya's Island, I ended up on life support, basically, from just extreme overheat and rushed to the hospital and given glucose, intravenous stimulus, and other stuff. And
Ooh.
It wasn't quite that bad, but it's one of the problems of playing gorillas in movies is Rick Baker has commented on that a lot, and that led me to realize I was hoping that David Warner would get his lines right. He eventually did, but that scene was, forever stuck in my brain that I sat there, well, I guess in Slurmy Beckerman's brain, which makes no sense to your listeners. Nobody remember the scene, but then go look it up and refresh their minds. But, yeah, we eventually got it, and it was so fun to work. And, I mean, Carl Reiner, ironically, I ended up doing shows with Carl Duff, who's a wonderful...
Carl Gottlieb?
Yeah.
I tried getting him on, and he turned me down. I was so devastated. I just love that man's work.
Yeah. Darn, well, they shouldn't turn you down.
I've been turned down by a lot of people, including names you've mentioned on this podcast, because they have this kind of horror hierarchy importance that they will only do podcasts if they know the person,
Might be a good time to try them again, because I suspect they're like all of us. They're captives in their castles.
I got the next 2 weeks booked, but maybe, right after I could. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know you're feeling about that. I had a major breakthrough a few months ago. For 32 years, I've been trying to sell my been a writer is one of my greater passions, and I've published 2 books. But and I know you can relate to this because you've published books. I've seen your wonderful graphic novels, but anyway, I finally got a breakthrough through a friend, and my memoir called Gorilla Tales: My Life as a Professional Primate is going to be published in June by Headline Books out of West Virginia, and it's a small independent publishing company, but a very interesting group. And I tried for 32 years to get that, but all my stories are in there. Tanya's Island, Trading Places, The Galactic Connections, my first major movie that I did, or non-major movie actually, and then all of the other adventures around the world. The American Tourister Gorilla for 15 years. I did that all over the world, from Colombia to South Korea to... Anyway, what the book is about is the humorous, kind of irreverent look at my world travels and experiences. It's kind of Hunter Thompson meets David Sedaris meets me.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of the stylistic approach. So I was sort of out of control Batman guerrilla journalist, wanting to continue these crazy guerrilla jobs that I had to get subject matter to write about. And so it was, again, a happy accident that I was a guerrilla, but I got to experience people and places all over the world and then write about it. And so I've really been a book person almost more passionately than I was a movie person. But that's a kind of a long answer to, I forgot what the question was.
I did too, but I'll move on. But with Trading Places, yeah, I mean, that is just one of the most iconic movie scenes during that whole train party. You know, of you playing this horny gorilla, you know.
Yeah. A role that only a mother could love.
Yeah. I wouldn't go that far, but yes.
No, well, unfortunately, my parents passed away before I did that film, but yeah, it was, that film was, my chapter on Trading Places in my book is one I'm really proud of. Just because the memories of it were so funny, and there was such so many crazy interactions with Eddie Murphy and Jamie Lee Curtis and the guy that played the bad guy that I was thumping, Paul. I forget his last name, but anyway.
Paul Gleason.
Really interesting.
Paul Gleason.
Yeah, Paul Gleason.
Yeah.
He didn't like the gorilla, didn't like me, because I had to hit him on the head, if you remember the scene.
Yes.
They stuck him in the Jim Belushi suit, the Halloween costume, put tape on his mouth, and put Paul Gleason into the suit, and they stuff him in with me, the supposed real, quote-unquote, gorilla. And then his punishment is I'm horny and humping the hell out of him on the screen.
With Franken and Davis watching.
Yeah, exactly. And I had to hit him on the head at first when he's still Paul Gleason, the character, or the actor, holding the gun. Mm-hmm. I have to reach to the bar and hit him. And I did it once. I didn't want to hurt him, even though I had a padded gorilla hand, and I kind of went point. And Landis came up and said, Don, you don't give him a love tap. You got to knock this guy out, man. You got to hit him hard. And so I said, well, he's getting upset because we did a couple takes, and I kind of hit him lightly, did a stage punch, and he looked around. He said, Paul said, Don. He didn't even say Don. He didn't know my name. He said, stop that. Haven't you ever heard of method actor? What are you, a method actor? You're hitting me so hard. This hurts. You're messing my hair up. And it was messing his hair up. And I thought, what the fuck with this guy? He's being a total
Yeah.
So John just came up and whispered, and he said, "Give him a hell." And I said, "Yeah, but he's going to get upset." He said, "Don't worry, just hit him really hard. It has to look real. I'll deal with him later." And so for the actual scene that made it in the film, I cranked it up and gave him a good. I pulled back a little bit, but I gave him a karate chop that would probably break a thin board in an instant. He just dropped like crazy to the ground, and it was a take. And then he hated me for that ever since. He said, "You're out of control. You're out of control." And everybody was kind of just looking away because he was a bit of a problem. Wonderful actor. He did so many good things in the Breakfast Club, you know.
Yep.
He was the principal, I believe, and
he was just like his characters then.
yeah, he was. And eventually, I mean, I met his wife years ago, and they had been separated before Paul passed away. But I told his wife, his ex-wife, the story, and she said, "You should have hit him harder."
Oh man.
So yeah, that film was so fun. We got stuck in a snowstorm, and we were in Newark, New Jersey, filming the train scenes, and a massive blizzard hit, and all of the actors and Landis said, "Okay, everybody on the train, we got to get back to Manhattan. You know, we're going to be stuck here." And it was the biggest blizzard in like 20 years. And I was still in the suit, and everyone just ran, jumped on literally the same train we were filming on. The train pulled off, and they said, "You got 5 minutes, Don, get." And I couldn't go. I had to put my costume away in the trunk, and so I missed the ride back to Manhattan. They said, "Well, you can go with Frank the Grip, because he's packing up the lights and stuff, and you can ride with him in his station wagon." And so what happened was I throw the gorilla in the back seat, and gorilla costume in the back seat, and I'm with Frank the Grip, and he's like a union teamster, you know. He said, "I don't need no stinking gorilla riding with me. What the hell's going on?" You know, he's kind of right out of central casting for a pissed off, angry Grip. And so eventually we drove back, and we got stuck in Secaucus, New Jersey on the turnpike, snow frozen for 12 hours. We were stuck in the same place, and I eventually put the gorilla suit on because we were running out of gas, and he couldn't. Had to keep turning on and off the ignition, and the heater would die. And I just had a little members-only windbreaker on. I go, "Frank, I got to put the gorilla suit on. It's freezing." So he said, "Oh, Jesus Christ, I need to sit here with a fucking gorilla." And I go, "All right." So I put the suit on, and that was, again, pretty funny, running around between cars and looking in windows. And people are afraid of freezing to death. And then, you know, there's a gorilla periodically hopping out of the station wagon and running back and forth between the cars and getting shot whiskey from. There was some guy that was selling shots of whiskey, $5 a swig.
Wow.
And I took a few swigs of the whiskey just to stay warm. But those stories are all in my book, Gorilla Town. So check it out, folks.
Yeah. So how long in total did you have to wear that costume for?
You mean in hourly duration, or?
Yeah, in trading places.
Oh, well, we did many times. They kept flying me back and forth from L.A. to New York, depending on when they needed me, because they'd shoot one day with the gorilla, and then they'd say, "All right, we're probably not going to need you, so go ahead and go back, and we'll just bring you back." And I'd go back to L.A., and 2 days later, they said, "Oh, we changed the script, we need you back here in New York." So I would be in the suit mostly. Yeah, it was usually 5-6 hours at a time, but in Tanya's Island, I was sometimes in the suit 10, 12 hours a day, just because the gorilla was one of the three. I don't want it sounds so pretentious to say I was the co-star of the film, but it was Vanity and Richard Sargent, the lead human, and me, basically, and that was pretty much it. And so on that film, I was in the suit sometimes up to 12 hours. And on your body because you just
Yeah.
lose so much perspiration that I've been in the hospital twice in serious condition in intensive care once, being in a gorilla suit, and yeah, it's a difficult thing that most people don't think about who haven't played gorillas, but Rick Baker knew about it because he did quite a few films in the gorilla suit.
He did John's first. He did John's first movie, Schlock. Yeah, and he did Greystoke, Tarzan, Lure of the Apes. Yeah.
Yeah. Great stuff.
He's a genius.
Yeah, so he
guy.
had a lot of experience sweating too, but he mainly kind of got into just making those costumes and other, Academy Award-winning costumes later. But he was the one who first showed me how to walk like a gorilla. So when I first did the American Tourister job, Rick recommended me, and I was the last auditioning person that they saw for that character. He called me up at about 5 o'clock, and he said, "Don, it's Rick. They need a gorilla. I'm building the costume. They need a gorilla for American Tourister luggage. They're casting it. They've seen like 100 or 50 stuntmen, and none of them are right because they're pretending to look like a gorilla. They're not really actors who can transform into primates, and I heard you'd be good for it, so if you can get over to the audition, they're really with them trying to find somebody to do this." And I said, "Oh man, I was just going to watch the Laker game." I said, "Okay." So I jumped in the car, raced from Sherman Oaks to Burbank, for those of you who know LA's geography. I got there at 5 to 6, and they were closing the audition. They said, "Oh man, are you stunting?" I said, "No, I'm an actor. I'm a mime movement person, actor, blah, blah, blah." So basically, I jumped in front of the camera, and the casting lady had her back to me on the phone, chain smoking cigarettes and looking off into the distance, talking to somebody on the phone, not even watching, and they were filming it on tape. So I transformed into an ape for the camera, and then just broke out of the filming area, went over and jumped on the casting lady's desk, took her phone out of her hand, and just hung up the phone and threw her papers all over, jumped off her desk and walked off and knuckle walked off and right out the door to my car. And I thought, I have nothing to lose. And they haven't been happy with anybody. I was going to go totally ape. And she just goes, "Get out. What are you doing? Who the hell? What? So I got home. I said, well, I could end my career as a gorilla. And I was able to get home in time to catch the second half of the Laker game.
Yeah.
Around 11 o'clock at night, the phone rang, and it was the casting person from the ad agency from American Tourister. He said, "Is this Don McLeod?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, we saw your tape." And there was a long silence, and I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Congratulations, you're the new American Tourister gorilla luggage smashing ape." And I went, "Oh, fantastic." I thought it would be one job, and I would, get a union day's pay. I think it was $8.50 or $6.50 at the time.
Yeah.
But those times. And it ended up being a 16-year career for me, as it led to Man with Two Brains, Trading Places, all kinds of other films, and they had the gorilla as the spokesperson. So I was on Regis and Kathy Lee, Wake Up America, NBC. We did 57 local and national TV shows, and I would come on with the suit and explain how Rick Baker and Steve Johnson had designed the suit and how it worked, and I would talk about smashing washing luggage, and so I became sort of the accidental spokesperson for the luggage company, and then that led to the movies, and we kind of looped around, and here I am standing in my sweatpants talking to you now.
You got a good story about working on Hook?
Yeah, Hook was a very interesting film. Of course, I had been a big fan of Robin Williams, and that started out with my agent said, Don, they need an extra on the movie Hook. They need somebody to be Peter Pan's shadow. It's just an extra role. Be $250 for the day, extra pay, not even anything special. And I said, oh, man, I really don't do extra work. It wasn't that I'm too good to. I just, I didn't like doing stuff for $125 and sitting around bored all day long. So I said, all right, I guess I could do it. I could always use $250, so minus withholding, which would be about $175. So I go to the set and jump around. They still had to have Spielberg see it, so I jumped around and I had to do some mime, like with hand shadows and also I had to kind of match Robin Williams. It turns out we were exactly the same size. So we're both 5'7", 5'6.5", 5'7", 5'6.5". Only short people had the half inch. Yeah, like 5'6.5". But so to make a long story slightly longer, Spielberg says, "Okay, great, you're shadow. Thanks. Next." I go, because that was it. He watched me jump around. I did some mime stuff, and boom. So I got the job. And I thought, well, they said, oh, just be like an hour shot, just like one major shot. And what happened was I'd have to come in every day, and they did matching ears and hair, wig, and I did a matching Robin Williams wig and ears. So I had to look just like him, even though it's just a shadow. So I do an hour and a half makeup every morning, like 6 a.m. in the makeup trailer, with Robin and other characters, Dustin Hoffman doing Hook and so forth. And then I would go to my trailer, and they say, well, you're our backup scene, Don. We'll probably get to you at the end of the day. We'll cut to 5 weeks later. I had been there every day for 5 or working days a week. Totally go through the makeup. I'm sitting in my trailer, and they say, we'll probably get to you later in the day today. And there was always something. They had to film a big scene, or Julia Roberts went psycho and locked herself in the trailer because she was breaking up with Kiefer Sutherland. And they said, we're not going to get to it today. And it went on and on like that. And the joke was I started out getting $250 for a couple hours SAG extra work. And I became a weekly principal actor. And the joke was that I was originally going to have enough money to maybe buy like a toaster or something. And then in the end, they'd see me come in each day and said, Don, I think you're going to be able to buy a swimming pool on this job. And so I had 5 weeks bumped up to union weekly actor scale pay, which amounted to thousands of dollars. They still didn't even have 1 second of screen time. But a couple of times I got to talk to Robin Williams, and he was so sweet. He said, mine's fabulous. And he said, you're a real master, meaning me. And I was going, no, you're a master, Robin. I'm pretty good at mine, but I'm not nowhere near what you've achieved. And he was like that to everyone. He was just so kind to people, and he was such a sweet man. And he was so encouraging to me. He just said, "Oh, it's a real pleasure to work with you." And he made me feel like I was like very special, and I was just doing 10, 20 seconds of Robin Williams' shadow. It's in the film. It's right before he jumps to the hole in the tree and falls down into Never Neverland. Quite brief, but I got to meet Robin and talk to him blah, blah, blah. But that was my introduction to, so I worked with Spielberg twice, which was pretty interesting. And I was, honored to have these connections, and they all were kind of accidental moments. And so, end of story.
So I know that you design statues. Do you have a gallery?
Well, no, they're human statues. They're people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you go to my website, livingstatue.com, you can look it all up. And I have movement artists in my company that are trained in one of my art forms, Japanese art form called Buto, Butoh. Buto is kind of like kabuki theater and no theater on slow motion LSD kind of influence. It's a very avant-garde, dark art form, and I studied it in Japan and here and fell in love with it, and I've been a Buto performer. It's called Buto dance, but it's really kind of a mixture of theater. It's very avant-garde. Look it up, Buto, and there's clips of me on YouTube doing Buto dancing, and that was, I forget the question, I'm sorry.
Oh, about having a gallery. That's all.
Oh, yeah, my statue company. So, yeah, that morphed into me doing living statues, and we paint ourselves bronze, gold, silver, or white, faux marble, and we recreate classic, mostly Greek and Roman statues, and we do lots of corporate and private VIP events, things like Jim Carrey's birthday party or some corporate guy's event or something, and we've gone all over the world with this. And so my company was started actually in 1974. We first did it, even earlier than that, and we're still going, and it grew into a full-time, that's my major occupation. We still do the gorilla. I have one of my protege students and now partner, Adam Mayer, and he's an actor, been in many films and commercials, and he mostly plays the gorilla now, but we still have a state-of-the-art gorilla suit available for films and commercials, and I haven't done it for a few years. I passed the torch to my trainee and friend, Adam, and he does most of the gorilla work now, but he's also one of my living statue people. And so that's a unique business. We've been on TV shows and, lots of different shows where they may need a statue that comes to life. So we're interactive, and we do slow transformational movement, which is related to the Buto dance. But it's also kind of like mime and slow motion. Mm-hmm. It's quite beautiful, really. The statues are... they have this... You might have seen people doing the living statues at Caesar's Palace and also the Venetian in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
They do statues there. Our company does that kind of thing. So we do mostly corporate jobs and private events and, crazy, whatever. People have called us up for all kinds of crazy things. And so that's I call that my night job, and my day job is still wrangling the gorilla. We've done movies in Turkey and Bogota, Colombia, and Uruguay, and a lot of the places that don't have special effects shops or people that make special effects practical costumes, mm-hmm. and not CGI, but so they'll call me, and I'm one of about 4 or 5 gorilla suits that are really good worldwide that work in these projects where they still need an actor in a suit. So that's one of the ways but it's like what you do. You're writing and your amazing artwork and all of that. everything's, we can still do it, but it's kind of grinded to a halt right now. And it's trying not to mention easy virus.
Yeah.
Everyone's oversaturated talking about it, but, we've kind of grinded to a halt with doing anything public for a while. As it should be, so plenty of time to write now and draw and paint and watch reruns of stuff.
Yeah, we're going to get out of it just fine, I think. It's going to be good for us because last 20 years, after 9/11, everyone's just been very greedy and selfish. I think this is going to humble people,
I agree totally. You're so right. I mean, the silver lining is that a global slap in the face, I think, to various excesses that, people need to reevaluate what's important, who's important, what is really necessary, and, it make the world great again, without a red hat on.
Without a red flag, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Don, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, I was interested, just before we wrap it up, we have some mutual friends. I saw Deborah Lamb is an old friend of mine, and Sullivan, one of my students. So,
I love.
Do you know Sean Sullivan?
Who?
Sean Sullivan. Maybe he just latched onto your website through another friend. I don't know.
Sean Sullivan, the one who's married to Lynn?
I'm not sure who he's married to. He's in Canada now. But
That's Sean Sullivan, who's married to Lynn Griffin. Yeah, Lynn's been a multiple guest, and Sean's been on the podcast once. They were actually supposed to come on again together a couple weeks ago for this show that they were doing, but then the coronavirus happened. And I love Sean and Lynn. They're awesome.
Yes, I didn't know much about his wife. I just know he studied with me a bit, and then he started performing, after I had kind of got things going. We were both in San Diego, and we were kind of lookalikes in terms of mime build, and I always encouraged him. He was super talented, and that's how I know Sean. So I've stayed in touch with him now for that was 1970-something, so we've been connected all those years. Anyway,
he's a funny guy.
It's a small world of movies and things, and in reading your various bios and all the stuff you've done, I bet he knows so-and-so. But, we could talk for another 3 hours about who we know.
Yeah, I got to get to...
It's interesting, but irrelevant probably to your listeners. But.
Yeah, I got to get to my next interview in 20 minutes. But
okay.
I appreciate it so much, Don. This was a lot of fun. And, I hope, once the quarantine is over, things will continue to be good for you.
Yes, and you too, for sure. And I'll let you know when my book comes out. It's supposed to be June, Gorilla Tales, so that would be, maybe we could get a shout-out on that somehow.
Oh, yeah, we could come back on and talk about it.
I would love to. You got it.
Awesome. You have yourself a great day, sir.
Okay, you too, Tommy. My best. I enjoyed it. So good.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Don McLeod. Ain't he a cool dude? Very nice guy. Very interesting guy. I like him a lot. Man, to play all those gorillas, man. Gorilling ain't easy. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Add me as a friend on Facebook. Join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes!